medicines, or like, is it more like
it's anything that you can articulate a manifestation of some improvement of the symptoms of the disorder that's backed up with evidence. And the issue there is that there's so little that's known about autism in general. And autism, I don't like the term because it's so wide and broad, and it's so complex. And because it's so complex, these kids and these kids turn into adults, these people deserve a chance at treatment that's going to help their condition. And there's so little out there to offer them that you have to allow them almost anything if you can articulate a reason why and back it up with evidence.
What we went through is this. We experienced this, and I think it's something that every parent has their own individual reaction to, but Brian Cawley has an autistic child, but she speaks, right? She's not cut off like the other deeper into the spectrum. And as Jim mentioned, the parents we encountered in the petition the first time through were, parents of 26-year-old kids who had autism their entire life. They had tried everything. There's not a treatment in the world that they had not tried. And the parents are like, they're early 70s, and they know they're not going to be around for a while. And what's going to happen to their kid? Kid's going to be put into a home because they're, you know what I mean? This is
imagine
this is their struggle.
Imagine this.
Like, can they try a little cannabis?
I've spent time working in a home care environment. I mean, I've seen parents. I worked with a kid who was about, I think he was 18. He weighed about 230 pounds. His mom was 5'0" and weighed probably 70 pounds soaking wet. I mean, he would literally, some.
It's a symptom of the disease, which is the uncontrollable.
And she's doing everything she can, but at the end of the day, when she's gone,
it's horrible. And you know what happens is at some point, for whatever reason, these people don't have someone to care for them any longer.
Exactly.
And do you know where they end up? They end up in jail. And all of it is preventable, and it all leads back to, Brian Kelly did a great thing when he passed that legislation, but killing this evidence-based treatment in the state of Michigan was a horrible thing to do, and it's
one of the few people in the history of Michigan, period, who's ever had the opportunity to actually make that happen. Happened to be one of the people who actually should know better than anybody else how important it is to have every possible treatment available that has any chance of working.
The point was, the claims that they wanted was that they needed to be clinical trials. Was that one of the denial reasons?
The clinical trials, the fact that there were none was one reason.
Well, the whole point was
that's the same thing as the federal government says.
No,
right?
The point was that
because the FDA hasn't tested, and the FDA won't test it because it's Schedule 1.
The MMA itself is supposed to provide the clinical trials. As long as there's evidence based in it, we had 90 peer-reviewed journals that supported cannabis to treat autism, which is
Remember when we saw Paul Armateo, too? He presented a report that had thousands of cannabis studies.
That's not. I'm just speaking about
a board that is composed primarily of medical professionals, licensed doctors that are licensed by the state of Michigan, by Laura, and a majority stated that they believed it should be added to the registry because they believe those reports. And again, a bureaucrat was the one that ultimately vetoed it, not a doctor. This is a pencil pusher in Lansing, the director of Laura.
What is in jail soon?
Yeah. So
well, hold on. I want to talk about that for a second because I ran into that. Show of all shows this week, and I is in out there in Genesee County Circuit Court where they were doing the preliminary exam for Eden Wells, who was the head of the medical. What was her title?
She's the chief medical officer of the state, I believe. Is that her title?
Chief medical executive.
Yeah.
Which put her on the board, and she was one of two people that voted against it. Like a 4-2 or 5, right? 4-2 vote. She is now being prosecuted by the Attorney General's office for negligent homicide, for causing the deaths of individuals for her neglect in duty.
Karma's a bitch.
And also, I think, perjury, lying to a law enforcement agent in the course of an investigation. Yeah, that's what she's going through.
Well, that's too
She'll
bad.
probably get a slap on the wrist.
Well, of course she will.
I don't know about that. I think that this is one of those kind of political circumstances where there's going to be some blood taken.
This is another one of Bill Schuette's. Look at me, I'm actually doing my job.
Maybe.
It just so happens when I'm running for governor.
It could happen. He's
the
7
master-
points behind.
His main campaign thing is he takes care of and ferrets out public corruption.
Right, so conveniently, let me announce my campaign.
Public corruption.
And then
Do we know
arrest
of
some
any
people
public
in
corruption
Flint.
that he's not ferreting out? Anybody? What's your face? Where's that? Where'd you go? Did we forget about that?
Yeah, don't you?
Comes back. Go ahead, Josh. Keep going.
Oh, no. No, I was pretty much the extent of it.
Hear this, much thanks to the Representative Yusuf Rabi for his House Resolution 0224. This is one of the, he's like the new Jeff Irwin, is that right? For in our state representative?
Yes.
Right. And a resolution calling on the United States Attorney General to respect the people of Michigan constitutionally protected right to regulate marijuana at the state level, calling on the President of the United States to replace him if he's unwilling to fulfill his duty. Ironically, our own Attorney General would not sign that same bill. But good for him, and thanks for doing that. And there's a bill now introduced for a resolution calling. They're looking for votes. I don't know. Where does that move next? I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill. If I'm trying to be a resolution, where do I go?
On Capitol Hill.
The resolution, I believe, goes in front of the committee. It follows
Committee
this.
of the whole?
No, it goes in front of the whatever committee it's been assigned to, I believe. I think it goes through the same process as a bill. But I'm not sure.
We were talking about this before? Yeah.
I'm not a legislator.
What?
Just straight to the session? Just straight to the floor. How nice.
Probably. But not
Yeah, well,
The committee of the whole.
outstanding.
That's on YouTube.
So I heard the state has accepted 16 total applications for licensees and has rejected all of the rest.
I believe there's only
Really?
been a
That's
submission.
what I've heard.
Really?
There have been
just-
less than 80 total submissions.
I thought that they were just not complete applications.
Yeah, I didn't think that the 16 I
Yeah,
believe
they've been
were-
rejected because they've been incomplete. Because that everybody, and that's the chatter I've been hearing for the last 2 weeks, is everybody's freaking out because the state is sending their apps back and saying, none of this is complete, you need to
Well, but
resubmit it.
The ones that I spoke with actually said that they were sending them, saying, please provide these additional documents. I don't think they'd actually been formally rejected.
Yes,
I think the state is somewhat understanding of the fact that they created something which is not as organized as maybe it could be, and to say the least. And every time I've called the state personally, the response seems to be along the lines of, well, did you read rule number da-da-da?
They don't.
Or my personal favorite, I can't give you any legal advice.
Yeah, that's they'd love to say that.
So,
Just submit the documentation, sir.
yeah, it's going to be a slow rollout.
Of course it is, and we're going to see what happens. I'm anxious to see who ends up actually being licensed.
The MFFLA is 21 pages. It's so confusing. It's going to be a big clusterfuck.
It's 46 pages.
Hey, that's Attorney Alan Pizer. He's advising it will be a clusterfuck.
Depends on how you space it, Josh. I guess in your type size.
Well, there are two sections. There's
Anyway,
the first 25 pages, which are the
it has
ad.
already been cited. It has already been cited in an opinion that I mentioned earlier tonight, which was Township of York versus Miller. And they mention it in that opinion because they say that while in the MMFLA, a local place like a township or city can opt in or opt out and decide whether or not they want these licenses operating there, the MMMA does not allow that. The does not allow for a local place to say you can't have caregivers or patients. So,
No, that's next.
but anyway, and I mentioned that This is the first time, as far as I know, that the MMFLA has actually been cited in a Court of Appeals opinion, because it obviously hasn't been litigated yet. It's too new for that, but it's already being cited just for that proposition that, in this case, they couldn't stop an outdoor grow.
Yeah, and I mean, there's... but it's interesting. There's definitely a lot of cities that still have set pretty extensive restrictions on caregiver use.
Well, they've been doing it for ever since the MMMA became in law in 2008. For example, Bloomfield Township was one of them. City of Birmingham was another one. And these both went to the Court of Appeals at the same time as Terbeek.
But they don't necessarily arrest people for the violations. They use the violations as a means to execute a search warrant, by which then they are able to arrest them for some proposed felony, which makes it harder for you to challenge the ordinance, really.
Yeah. Well, those ordinances have been challenged. As I said, they in Lott versus the City of Birmingham, which came about at the same time, and Bloomfield Township, which both required registrations, that the person had to register with the local police department if they were a caregiver or patient. Both those cases didn't have an actual person who'd been ticketed, unfortunately. They were challenging it ahead of time. So the courts held that they were not ripe for decision, and there was no need for a decision in light of the recent Terbeek opinion. But these newer ordinances that are coming out, like the City of Warren, where they want people to have an electrical inspection and other compliance checks, those are more problematic under footnote 9 of Terbeek.
Yes. And the city has admitted repeatedly, that they're relying on footnote 9 for all of the restrictions that they've put in place, but some of them are just completely over the line. I think the building code stuff, that makes sense to me. And, I mean, any other sort of modification you make to your house, you have to do it to code. And
sure.
As long as they are not making it an onerous process and preventing you from obtaining the proper permits to do so. But outside of that,
We're using it, and
what
then
about confidentiality?
As soon as I shut down.
Well, the confidentiality, I mean, you don't have to tell them what you're doing, I guess. You could just have the power run.
but they'll presume.
Well, they can presume whatever they want.
It's true.
But
I'm kind of curious, and it's been something that's been talked a little bit about between myself and other people in our office, and I know that Jeff has also been in on it. Is, you know, as this new program rolls out, every municipality is kind of taking their own approach for how exactly, like, you know, how many are we going to allow? Are we going to just open it up? Are we going to say that only 5 of each type? Are we going to create an application process? Are we doing a lottery? Is it first come, first serve? And I think a lot of these places are going to get sued. They cannot create these programs. I mean, how is, you know, the municipality of Bumble Nowhere, Michigan, you know, small town, 500 people, all of a sudden going to sit there and say, yeah, I'd like you to submit a 120-page application, and our specialized expert panel will determine whether or not your security plan, your business plan, your financial projections are accurate, and whether they live up to the standard, and we'll pick 5 of you out of 100.
Well,
and then even better than that, they follow up by saying every single person who submits one is going to give us a $5,000 fee, and so 95 of you are just giving us $5,000.
Other municipalities will make it more attractive for those businesses to move in. So, case in point, I live in Centerline. It's a 1.5 mile square. The ordinance they just approved will allow 75 licenses to be issued in my 1.5 mile square city.
That's
because
awesome.
they
It's gonna be
want
like Vegas.
they want the tax revenue.
you pumped?
And- yeah, it's the right thing to do.
It's going to be fun.
Allow the market to saturate, and then it'll control itself.
Wow.
So, and there's going to be more municipalities that are going to do that. It's just a matter of the program being successful.
I'm coming to Centerline.
So is Jim's Candy Shop going to be in Centerline?
No, I will never be a license holder, ever. No. But maybe Josh.
Josh's Candy Shop.
Josh's Candy Shop. Have a good night, folks.
Thank you for listening, everyone. 800-656-3557.